Well, Donald Trump is running scared tonight because we are all witnesses now. Donald Trump is posting on social media today and tonight that he had a good phone call with the governor of Minnesota, who Donald Trump has been demonizing until today. And he's not demonizing him anymore because we are all witnesses now. Tonight, Donald Trump posted that he had a good phone call with the mayor of Minneapolis, who Donald Trump has been calling a communist and attacking in the most unhinged Trumpian ways. But Donald Trump is making conciliatory public statements tonight about wanting to cooperate now with the governor of Minnesota and wanting to cooperate now with the mayor of Minneapolis because Donald Trump is running scared tonight. Donald Trump is in retreat tonight. And Donald Trump is running scared because we are all witnesses now. When we see the video, we become eyewitnesses. And if we watch all of the videos of what Donald Trump and his Border Patrol agents did to Alex Preddy, we then become better eyewitnesses than the people who would be allowed to testify at a murder trial as eyewitnesses because they were there on the scene. Some of those eyewitnesses were recording video at the same time, which actually distracts from what they can take in as eyewitnesses in that moment because they are also camera operators as well as eyewitnesses. Contrary to popular opinion and Hollywood portrayals, eyewitness testimony is not as reliable as factual circumstantial evidence is, like ballistics reports and autopsies, which are often the most solid evidence in any murder case. Professor Elizabeth Loftus's groundbreaking work on eyewitness testimony, including the books she's written about eyewitness testimony, have shown all of the human weaknesses that come with standard eyewitness testimony. An eyewitness might honestly believe someone was shot in the back, and another eyewitness might not be so sure. But if the autopsy shows an entrance wound in the back, then that is not just evidence, that is proof beyond a reasonable doubt of being shot in the back. And the autopsy is technically circumstantial evidence, but it's better evidence often than eyewitness testimony. Each eyewitness only has their individual angle on what they can see. But when we collect multiple videos of the same shooting of Alex Preddy, and we watch all of those videos, we become the best eyewitnesses to that shooting. We are all witnesses now. And eyewitnesses have a right to believe what they see. Eyewitnesses have a right to reach conclusions about what they see. And since we are all now eyewitnesses to two of Donald Trump's agents he sent to Minnesota, firing 10 shots into a man face down on the pavement and killing that man in a matter of seconds, we can all look at the video and conclude beyond a reasonable doubt that every shot fired after the first shot is murder. Not negligent homicide. That might be what the first shot is, because an analysis of the videos showed that an agent in a gray jacket removed a handgun from Alex Preddy's right hip and rushed away with that handgun. And immediately after he removed that handgun and stepped away, the first shot was fired into Alex Preddy's back or the back of his head. And that first shot could have been because the man in the gray jacket said, "There's a gun." But the gun was already removed when that first shot was fired. So that first shot could have been a mistake within that space of interaction. And that shot fired less than 3 feet away from Alex Preddy very, very likely killed him. The autopsy will tell us. But what happens next on the video, as you will see in a moment, is that all of the agents, all of them, upon hearing that first shot, start backing away from the now lifeless body. They're walking backwards away from the body. And as they walk backwards away from the body, they fully reveal and are looking at a motionless body lying face down in front of them on the pavement with nothing else around that body. And they can all see absolutely no threat posed to anyone by that body, which is probably a dead body at that point. And that is when two, and only two, of those agents decide to continue to pump bullets into Alex Preddy's body. And that decision is murder. It is a decision, not a reflex. Each shot fired by law enforcement officer has to be a decision, not a reflex. Law enforcement officers are supposed to be trained to assess the situation after each shot fired to determine if another shot needs to be fired. There are several agents positioned around Alex Preddy's body, and most of them decide there is absolutely no reason to fire a gun while those other two agents are firing their guns. And the agents who didn't fire their guns, who knew there was absolutely no threat to their lives or anyone else's, those agents were right. And the killers of Alex Preddy were wrong. And that is what the facts before us right now prove beyond a reasonable doubt. We're going to show you now the 24-second video, a disturbing video shot from the angle that shows that the shots are still being fired as the officers have stepped backward, far into a safety zone. It is correct to step backward. That's where the safety is. And they have stepped backward into the safety zone, away from that man lying face down on the pavement, and two of them decide it's time to shoot him several more times. Here is that video.
They're doing too much, man, and they keep pushing people, you know?
The next video you're about to see, and take the time, if you care to go online and watch these videos again yourself. We're only showing them once. They go by in seconds. They're very quick. The action's very quick. You might want to watch it more than once to understand what you're seeing, or see the New York Times analysis of the videos that's available online. But this next video shows Alex Preddy trying to be helpful, not to Donald Trump's federal agents, but to the people in the area. Cars trying to pass through. Alex Preddy is directing traffic to those cars, trying to help out those motorists. And then Alex Preddy tries to be helpful to a woman with an orange backpack who is assaulted by Donald Trump's Border Patrol agents. That agent committed the crime of assault and battery. The agent you will see committing the crime of assault and battery against that woman, because that's what it is, beyond a reasonable doubt on that video, that is assault and battery. That agent is one of the killers of Alex Preddy. Keep that in mind as you watch this video. It begins with the crime of assault and battery committed by an agent who then goes on to commit murder. Alex Preddy, you will see, commits no crime. Alex Preddy tries to help the woman who has been assaulted. And then Alex Preddy gets assaulted. And Alex Preddy and the woman both fall to the ground. And that woman is alive today only because, as you will see on this video, when she's on the ground being assaulted by Donald Trump's Border Patrol agents, she does everything she possibly can to crawl away from the agent who is assaulting her and trying to hold her in place. And because she was successful in crawling as far away as she did from Alex Preddy and from that agent, she is alive tonight. Those 10 bullets would have been used to probably murder her too. Those 9 bullets fired at Alex Preddy after the first shot had probably already killed him. Those 9 bullets would have found her in that kind of shooting spree if she hadn't done everything she possibly could to get away from Donald Trump's federal agents who's trying to hold her in place. So watch Alex Preddy directing traffic, trying to be helpful. Watch the woman with the orange backpack get assaulted, illegally assaulted by that agent. Watch her fall to the ground. Watch Alex Preddy fall to the ground. This will go by in seconds, that action. It's very disturbing to watch. Here is that video.
is wrong with you? Get the people! The is wrong with you? Honestly! What did you just do? What the did you just do? What the What the Oh my god! 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 The did you just do? The did you just do? He is with somebody call the ambulance. Somebody call the ambulance. Somebody needs to call the ambulance. Somebody call 911. I can't believe they just did that. Holy just come on. Come on.
Hey, go down!
Oh my god, you people, man. You're killing us. Why would you do that? Oh my god, oh my god. I can't believe I'm seeing this. I can't believe I'm seeing this. Oh my god. Come on, come on, come on, come here, come on. Come here. It is. Oh my god!
Chest seals!
Recorded across the
That blurring was inserted in the video by the network to block the actual sight of Alex Pretty's body lying on the pavement there. And when you watch that video and the aftermath of the murder, the question becomes, why didn't they kill them all? Why didn't they kill them all? There were other brave people on that street who continued to record on video what those agents had done and what they were doing. You can see a woman in that video getting up very close to where the shooting occurred after the shooting. Why didn't they kill her? Alex Pretty didn't do anything more than what she was doing. Instead, those agents, after they've killed someone, after that, they've cooled down enough not to kill everyone in sight. After they've killed one. That's what it takes to get them to decide, oh, this is not a situation in which we have to kill anyone, including this woman who's coming up very close to us now with her camera. And in the end, you see her bending over in agony at what she has witnessed. Why wasn't she killed? If it was legitimate to kill Alex Pretty. Remember, the presumption of innocence is only a theory, a legal theory. It is a legal theory designed to structure criminal prosecutions. The structure of a criminal prosecution is based on that theory of presumption of innocence. That's the way the process is constructed. And that, for example, is why there's no requirement in American law that the defendant must testify. In other countries, defendants do have to testify, but not here, because of the presumption of innocence, which binds absolutely no one other than a jury. The only people who are charged with observing the presumption of innocence at the outset of a criminal trial are the jury. The prosecutor doesn't presume innocence. That's why the prosecutor is there. The prosecutor presumes guilt beyond a reasonable doubt in that room and makes that case in that room. No one in the general public is required to presume innocence of criminal defendants or potential criminal defendants. No one in the news media is required by any judicial principle to presume innocence. But the news media, cowed by the phrase presumption of innocence and failing to comprehend it, ends up often softening language in coverage of what we can all see, because We are all witnesses now. Donald Trump's dangerously buffoonish FBI director, who was chosen as an insult to the FBI, said this.
You do not get to attack law enforcement officials in this country without any repercussions. You do not get to do that in Minnesota, LA, or anywhere else.
Oh, yes, you do. These people got to do that. And they got to do that because they were doing it for Donald Trump. They were attacking police officers for Donald Trump. And they did it without any repercussions because they did it for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump pardoned every single one of them because they attacked police officers and tried to beat them to death for Donald Trump. Trumpism means believing that if you don't support Donald Trump, the United States Constitution does not support you. You have no rights granted under the Constitution if you don't support Donald Trump. Rights are granted by Donald Trump to Trump supporters. That is Trumpism, as perfectly articulated just then by his buffoonish FBI director. Donald Trump is removing Greg Bovino as the commander of his invasion forces in Minneapolis and replacing him with, who could it be? Tom Homan, who was recorded on an FBI video accepting $50,000 in cash during the last Trump presidential campaign from FBI undercover agents. Donald Trump's Justice Department closed down that investigation of Donald Trump's friend, Tom Homan. But that investigation can be reopened 3 years from now when a Democrat is president. And we will eventually see that video of Tom Homan accepting the $50,000 from the FBI undercover agents. Alex Preddy was an intensive care unit nurse at a veterans hospital. Donald Trump, of course, doesn't care about veterans at all, but he pretends to as a politician and as a campaigner. Alex Preddy devoted his life to veterans, devoted his life to saving their lives. And he did. I, for one, didn't understand that nurses are the greatest heroes who walk among us until I was hospitalized for the first time in 2014 after being injured in the backseat of a taxi cab in a head-on collision. That's when I became, for the first time, fully dependent on nurses for months. I was in awe of their quiet competence and heroism and devotion. I loved my nurses and still do. We can never thank our nurses enough. And the one thing I know about Alex Preddy's life is that he was never thanked enough, no matter how hard people tried to thank him, because we, the patients, can never find the words big enough to express our gratitude and love to our nurses. Alex Preddy's last words were words he said thousands upon thousands of times in his life as a nurse, in his work as a nurse. Alex Preddy's last words were, "Are you okay?" That's what he asked the woman with the orange backpack, who he was trying to help. He was trying to protect. Are you okay? That's what he was worried about, not himself. Are you okay? Jessica Hauser posted this on social media. I was Alex Preddy's final nursing student. He was my friend and my nursing mentor. For the past 4 months, I stood shoulder to shoulder with him during my capstone preceptorship at the Minneapolis VA hospital. There, he trained me to care for the sickest of the sick as an ICU nurse. He taught me how to care for arterial and central lines, the intricacies of managing multiple IVs filled with life-saving solutions, and how to watch over every heartbeat, every breath, and every flicker of life, ready to act the moment they wavered. Techniques intended to heal. Alex carried patience, compassion, and calm as a steady light within him. Even at the very end, that light was there. I recognized his familiar stillness and signature calm composure shining through during those unbearable final moments captured on camera. It does not surprise me that his final words were, "Are you okay?" Caring for people was at the core of who he was. He was incapable of causing harm. He lived a life of healing, and he lived it well. I am a better nurse because of the wisdom and skills he instilled in me. I carry his light with me into every room, letting it guide and steady my hands as I heal and care for those in need. Take one step, no matter how small, to help heal our world. Through these acts, carry his light forward in his name. Let his legacy continue to heal. The nation's largest union of registered nurses issued a statement saying that they, quote, seek justice for the murder by federal immigration agents of fellow registered nurse Alex Preddy. We nurses are forever patient advocates, and that means we will fight to protect you at the bedside, and we will fight to protect you in the streets, just as Alex was doing when he was executed in cold blood by Border Patrol. Imagine being the parents of a 37-year-old life-saving nurse in perfect health. Imagine being the parents of any 37-year-old to discover on Saturday morning that your 37-year-old son, who woke up in perfect health in Minneapolis, is now dead. Dead from any cause, a car accident maybe. Imagine that. I, for one, cannot imagine how parents can ever manage to cope with the grief of the death of their child at any age. We parents are supposed to go first, not our children. Michael and Susan Preddy were hit with that devastating knee-buckling grief. And then they were hit with Donald Trump's lies and Donald Trump's Homeland Security Secretary's even worse lies about their son. And then they were hit on Sunday morning with more lies on TV from the always lying Greg Bovino, the leader of Donald Trump's invasion forces in Minnesota. And even Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary, of all people, could not resist lying about Michael and Susan Preddy's son on Sunday morning TV. Imagine, with all they had to bear, Alex Preddy's parents had to compose and put out a written statement. I would not be able to compose a single sentence under those circumstances. But through it all, through the pain, the grief, the unrelenting agony, the weight of all of that, Michael and Susan Preddy composed themselves enough to say this: we are heartbroken, but also very angry. Alex was a kind-hearted soul who cared deeply for his family and friends, and also the American veterans whom he cared for. As an ICU nurse at the Minneapolis VA hospital, Alex wanted to make a difference in this world. Unfortunately, he will not be with us to see his impact. I do not throw around the hero term lightly. However, his last thought and act was to protect a woman. These sickening lies told about our son by the administration are reprehensible and disgusting. Alex is clearly not holding a gun when attacked by Trump's murdering and cowardly ICE thugs. He has his phone in his right hand, and his empty left hand is raised above his head while trying to protect the woman ICE just pushed down, all while being pepper sprayed. Please get the truth out about our son. He was a good man. Thank you. Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty, who has prosecutorial jurisdiction over murder cases in Minneapolis, will join us next. A Trump Justice Department lawyer told a federal judge in Minneapolis today, this whole event rose out of a federal immigration matter, was conducted by federal officers doing their federal duty, and the aftermath, whatever happened, is a federal matter. Joining us now is Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty, who has jurisdiction over homicide investigations in Minneapolis. Are you conducting a homicide investigation of the killing of Alex Preddy?
Yes, we are doing that in conjunction with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Can I say, though, before that, I saw the Preddy's statement, and our victim witness people were going to reach out to the parents, and I asked them to convey that I would make every effort on every interview I did to talk about who Michael or Alex Preddy really was and not let the lies about him go unchallenged. So thank you so much for talking about who he really was.
Well, in a situation like this, in an investigation like this, to what extent is the case informed by who Alex Preddy actually is? How relevant is his behavior in life leading up to this moment?
Well, most of the investigation is about what actually happened there. I think if his motivations were challenged or we had to look into why he was there, who he was might make more of a difference there. But we're pretty focused on what happened there at the scene, what he did, what the ICE agents did. And we, some of the videos you showed, we've got those and many, many more. We've synced them into, so you can see every angle of it. And we've watched those many, many, many times. We're also interviewing witnesses and just trying to gather all of the information that we can so we have a full picture. Now, as you know, not only do we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that an agent or agent shot and killed him, we have to be able to disprove a defense that law enforcement has that what they did was not objectively reasonable. And then you add on to this the idea that if we do charge, they are going to try to remove it to federal court. There are some different challenges here than you would see in ordinary prosecutions of homicide cases.
You told us last week that if a case like this is removed to federal court, the local prosecutors, would still be the prosecutors on the case.
Yes. Which is very unusual. So we would expect if we did charge that they would attempt to remove the case to federal court. We would challenge that, but ultimately we don't really have a choice in that. But if it did go to federal court, we would still be the prosecutors. It would not be the U.S. Attorney's Office. And most importantly, probably state law still applies. So if somebody were to be convicted in federal court on our case, Trump could not pardon that person.
And as you go forward, is this the same approach you're taking in the Renee Good case?
Yes, unfortunately, we've had to take that approach in both of those cases, but also the third shooting where a man was shot in the leg last week. We are also investigating that in conjunction with the BCA.
So you're in complete disagreement with the Trump Justice Department lawyer who said in federal court today that the aftermath, whatever happened, is a federal matter.
Not at all. Two people that were residents in our community were shot and killed. It does not matter who those people work for. They were shot and killed in Hennepin County. We have jurisdiction over this. Now, the federal government could have jurisdiction over it as well, but that does not preclude us from proceeding with a case should we think that that's appropriate. And you need only look at the Melissa Hortman assassination, where we do have joint or dual prosecutions going forward. The feds are going first, and we're waiting patiently until they finish with him, and then we'll go forward with our prosecution. That was not a law enforcement agent, but that is certainly how it should work.
Hennepin County Prosecutor Mary Moriarty, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Of course.
Thank you. And coming up, we'll be joined by two law enforcement experts to consider just how reasonable it was. Was it a reasonable practice to fire those shots at Alex Preddy? That's next. We just heard Hennepin County Prosecutor Mary Moriarty say that the question she will be focusing on in her homicide investigation of the killing of Alex Preddy is whether there was any reasonable justification for law enforcement to fire 10 shots at him. And joining us now to consider that question are Mark Claxton, director of the Black Law Enforcement Alliance and a retired NYPD detective. Also with us, Kirk Burkhalter, professor of law at New York Law School, where he is the director of the 21st Century Policing Project. He is also a retired NYPD detective. Mark Claxton, what do you see when you put all these videos together?
What I see are several violations of DOJ's own policies multiplied exponentially. And I think along with use of force policies DOJ has adopted, which is kind of the national standard, imminent threat of serious physical harm or death to yourself or others. There was a violation of also their de-escalation requirement, along with the affirmative duty to intervene, which deals specifically with intervening on your partner's misconduct or some conduct on the street there. You can directly intervene. You're required to directly intervene. I didn't see any intervention to attempt to de-escalate or to eliminate this threat that was obviously posed by the ICE or Border Patrol agents themselves. And then also affirmative duty to render aid. I didn't see, and I don't know if you have seen any video about this, but I haven't seen any rendering of aid immediately following the shooting. What I saw was some retreat by these quote unquote professional law enforcement individuals. So there are several different layers of policy violations along with the atrocity of this enforcement operation.
Kirk Burkhalter, what do you see in the videos?
What jumps out to me is the ramifications of a law enforcement officers who are not trained for the mission that they were asked to do. The tactics appear to be poor. This is a classic example of contagious fire. They are gassing themselves when they're deploying tear gas, and they are, as you mentioned in your opening, committing assaults. If law enforcement, if you put your hands on someone, you push them down, that may be necessary force for arrest. But if there's no arrest, then that's a crime. So for me, the majority of this leads back to, as far as the officers are concerned, these agents, not trained for this mission whatsoever. It's just taking a group of folks and throwing them out there and asking them to enforce the law. This is the result.
I'm so glad you mentioned the contagious fire phenomenon, because that was a point that I saw and wanted to include in our analysis. And Mark, that's the phenomenon. We've seen it for as long as we've been studying these cases, that one officer in a group fires and that creates a contagion effect with someone else firing, thinking, not knowing where the threat was coming from necessarily. There's a lot of reasons for it, but that multiple shot situation from multiple shooters is always a fascinating thing to see, especially when most of the officers who have exactly the same opportunity see no reason to fire their weapons.
Yeah, and that's important to point out. And what it shows is that a professional law enforcement person understands quite clearly that each individual officer or agent is responsible for each trigger pull or discharge of that weapon. They have to make individual assessments about what is an imminent threat of serious physical harm or death to themselves. And they have to make those decisions, not part of groupthink, because that's when you get into these contagious situations, but they have to respond based on their own individual assessments, not necessarily influenced by their partners. So you have that situation. And you also have this other element of officer-created jeopardy that oftentimes comes into play in these situations, where it is the law enforcement professional who is initiating the actions that lead to a situation where there is a fatal confrontation. And then they come back to say, well, we were put in a position where there was an imminent threat to ourselves.
Yeah, the first shooting of this kind that I ever studied, a shooting in Boston in 1975, was one officer started firing because the other officer started firing for exactly that reason. Kirk, as a lawyer, what do you see in terms of this case as a homicide investigation? A homicide is a legally neutral word. It just means a human being killed a human being, sometimes justified, sometimes not. But what do you see here as a lawyer in this case?
Well, it will turn on reasonableness. The agents involved, whether they can articulate that their use of force was reasonable based on their experiences in the light of all circumstances. I will tell you, this is quite a hill for them to climb. We have video of the gun being removed prior to the shots were being fired. Did the officer that removed the weapon call out to the other officers that he had removed the weapon? This man was on the ground and multiple officers were trying to subdue him. Was it necessary to shoot him. We heard these reports that he brandished a weapon, never brandished a weapon. It's going to be difficult, but that reasonableness, right? That's what law enforcement officers must articulate when explaining the use of force in the face of criminal charges.
Kirk Burkhalter and Mark Claxton, thank you both very much for joining us tonight.
You're quite welcome.
And coming up, Andrew Weissmann will join us next. Today, Minnesota's Deputy Attorney General Brian Carter told a federal judge, quote, "If this is not stopped right here, right now, I don't think anybody who is seriously looking at this problem can have much faith in how our republic is going to go in the future." Joining us now is Andrew Weissmann, former FBI general counsel and an MS Now legal analyst. Andrew, stark terms for this point in the American legal process. What's your assessment of where we are tonight?
Well, I have a legal assessment and I have a sort of policy assessment, and it's really hard to start with the legal, even though I know that's why I'm here. I think that I'm going to start with a policy point of view, which is everything that's happening in Minnesota is not about the sort of agents on the ground and the, in my view, completely lawless behavior that we're seeing, because none of that happens without the impunity that has been afforded them by the White House. They're carrying out sort of the literal marching orders of the White House. So we may see that Kristi Noem is sort of now bypassed, and that Agent Bovino is moved away. That, to me, to be very blunt, is lipstick on a pig. That doesn't make any difference whatsoever if the policy doesn't change. And on the legal front, there are challenges based on the 10th Amendment, the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment. You have to remember the district judges here are in a very, very conservative and somewhat erratic circuit. And we've already seen one injunction be overturned by the Eighth Circuit, just a few hours ago. And so I think the real answer here is going to be on the sort of the people being on the streets reacting to what's going on and the pressure that politicians, the news agencies put on the administration in terms of what's happening.
As the local prosecutors look at this, these two homicides that we've seen there, knowing that they're on their own, that they are going to have to try to do this investigation on their own, federal government could be withholding evidence, they could have a years-long battle trying to get evidence from the federal government handed over to them. Isn't it a possibly messy legal future here?
That part is a messy legal future. They're doing all the right things. There is pending litigation to have a turnover of evidence, to have evidence preserved. I want to make sure people understand what the federal government has said today in court, that when federal agents go to Minneapolis, even if they commit a state crime, and not just any state crime, the state crime of murder, that the local police department has absolutely nothing to do about that. They have no jurisdiction, that the federal government can come in, commit murder, and that the locals do not have the ability to act. That is the statement of the Trump administration today in court. That cannot be the law, and I really do not think that will be the law. Final point, the statute of limitations on murder is forever. And so this is something that this may be justice delayed, but it may not be justice denied.
So glad you made the point about the statute of limitations. Andrew Weissmann, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
Andrew Weissmann gets tonight's last word.